clear people are ready or interested in paying for it. So if you have an idea if it's working, if it's not working, I think you should think. Maybe people have none. There is something wrong. Let me put it this way. It could be that you have not, your idea is great, but you have not been able to communicate it well. It may be that what you have is good, but you haven't figured out how to sell. It doesn't necessarily have to be that your product or offering or service is bad idea, but there is something in the value chain that's not working. And
Saurabh, another way of doing that is to test out whether somebody is willing to pay for it. So,
yeah,
if you have
absolutely
come up with some sort of a set of services, so therefore, as you said, marketing is probably the first real test of whether that idea is right or not.
Because even if you're raising financing, the angel of the VC is first going to ask you, so what, is there attraction in the market? I mean, you think it's a great idea? Have you tested it with anybody? So the sales or marketing, I think, is very key. Let me give you an example outside of startups on this flipping. Many years ago, when I was your age, maybe even younger, I was very interested in badminton, so I used to go to a coaching class, and at the end of that coaching class, I made it to my college team, and one other person who was with me, he became India #1. So clearly, there was a talent issue. But let me tell you about him. He was India #1, he was world #3, a chap called Suresh Goyal. And he had a certain style of game. It was a very defensive game. It was a Bjorn Borg of badminton, and he would win. And one time, I saw him in a finals of a major tournament, which was being played here in India. And he lost the first set. It was a 3-set thing, best of 5, best of 5. And he was giving it everything he got, and he lost the second as well. And then they had a break. Then he came back. And in the third set, he was playing a game I had never seen him play. It was a very aggressive game. He was smashing all over the place. He won the set, and actually he won the match. So I asked him at the end, I said, look, I have never seen, I've taken coaching with you for years, and never have I seen you on the court play this game. What happened? And he said, look, in the break, I sat and thought about what was happening. So first I said, what could be wrong? Why am I losing? Is it that I'm not having a good day? Is it that I'm a little sluggish? Is there something I'm doing wrong? And he said, I reached the conclusion that I was playing as well as I could. There was nothing wrong. But it wasn't good enough. So basically I said, listen, if I keep doing the same thing, I'll get the same result. So I better change my game. He flipped his game. And that is what he's talking about, engaging with the market. I mean, if you're not getting anywhere with what you have, for whatever reason, rethink. One of the best examples is, if any of you meet Bhavish Agarwal of Ola Cabs, talk to him. He had a model, he came to Naukri for funding. I'm on the board, so I can share that with you. And he didn't get funded.
So this is one of the big regrets that Sanjeev has.
But, so I was moderating a panel where Sanjeev and he were sitting. So I asked Sanjeev, do you have any regrets? He said, yeah, I didn't fund Bhavish. And Bhavish said, no. He said, no, sir. Actually, what you did was right. My model that I had at that time was not a good model. So your decision to not invest was actually the correct decision. So he said, I went and I was struggling with it and wasn't getting anywhere. And then I started talking to my customers, whom I thought were my customers. And from there came the model that I now have. So it's flipping, to my mind. I mean, please ask questions on that. It's a difficult piece, but like PG said, the best way to figure that out is engage with the market, engage with your customers. And don't have a big enough ego which says I can't be wrong. You can be wrong. All of us can be wrong. So, and at the end of the day, it's not the VC or the angel investor. Even if you get funding, that's not the issue, because it's your life. You're going to spend a year, 2 years, 3 years of your life. So you want to make sure you're spending it on the right thing.
So, talking about funding,
did we say now, does it give you an idea, or is there a question?
there is a, okay.
My name is Piyush, and I also started a company around 9 years ago. And the flipping is a part and parcel of the game, I understand. We started with traditional offline retail, and then we switched on to O2O and e-commerce as a strategy after funding by Excel in 2010. Then, this was 5 years into the game, and then we had to change the strategy. But one thing, you've always given example of people who are just starting up and thought processes of the people who are just testing the concept or very early stage into the game. But I'll put question for the people who are already into the game, well deep into it. We have revenues going up to say $15 to $20 million now, and with the funding, you always have a dilemma how fast you should run. Will you run out of money fast enough? That's my question. How much should you be hungry for growth, and one fine day you're standing again dried up and diluting your equity once more?
So more on the funding side that you're talking about, funding and combination of growth.
How to maintain a balance between growth and burn rate, really?
And before we just finished with the topic on flipping or pivoting is maybe a better word. It's at any stage of your company. It's not when it's just a startup idea. Everybody, all of you may have heard of what is called the Kodak moment. They were top of the game, they were doing phenomenal, and then they lost the plot. They weren't listening to customers. They disappeared because trends, technology were moving in one direction and they were static. So I think it's important to remember that this pivoting can happen at any time. If you're not listening to customers, it's a challenge.
Yeah, IBM is a prime example.
It almost died. IBM almost died. Yeah. So it does, and to give you an example of how strong the value is, that when I was working for IBM, the profits of IBM were more than the revenues of the next 5 companies combined. So its next 5 companies were called the bunch. Burroughs, Univac, NCR, Control Data, Honeywell. The bunch. Revenues of the bunch were less than profits of IBM. The revenues of the bunch were less than the R&D budget of IBM. So you would think, IBM owned the world, and it almost died. And some of its competitors at that time actually did die. Digital Equipment Corporation, Control Data. Which of them do you hear about today? They're dead.
Do you think they've heard these names?
Yeah, it's a good point. You may not have heard these. These were the biggest companies in the 70s and in the 80s. So it gives you an idea that you don't even know their names today, right? But coming back to what you were saying on growth, it's kind of a mixed thing on financing. You're saying, what should you go for, growth or not growth?
Saurabh, last year I was on a panel, and this discussion was going on with some VCs. And all the VCs at that time were saying that, we want that our companies should go out there in the market and grab real estate. Okay, so, go and get market share because, it is the last man standing. So ultimately you have to be amongst the top 2 or 3 players. So just go out and, take money and continue to grow and continue to get that market share. About 4 months back, I was at this another similar sort of a panel discussion with a similar set of VCs, and everybody was talking about path to profitability. Okay, everybody was saying, no, no, we just can't keep on burning money and we need to have that path to profitability. So these stories keep on changing every couple of years, and I think that confuses a whole lot of entrepreneurs. So what is that should be done?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's a bit like, eggs are bad for your heart and eggs are now considered to be good for your heart, So what do you do? So here's the thing. Let's put it this way. Staying still or growing very slowly is not an option. Because in a very competitive market, you can't actually stay in the same place. On a relative basis, you either go down or you go up, based on what everybody else is doing. So the first thing is, not growing is not an option. The thing with growth though is, unless you have figured out what your unit economics is, more growth creates more problems. What do I mean by unit economics? I mean, let me make it very simple. There's a cost of producing a product and there's revenues that you get for it. What is your margin? Are you profitable on that unit piece or not? You can just shut that light.
Those two lights,
Yeah. Just shut them down actually.
Shut them down.
Yeah.
Okay. It was good as it was.
Yeah. So, if you are making, fundamentally, if it's a profitable product, people are willing to pay a price on which you can make a margin on that product, you're in a good space. Now the issue is, if you expand the market rapidly, your overall administrative costs, organizational issues, sales and marketing costs, all of those will go up fast, and they'll go up faster than you're selling the product. So you may get into a growth mode which is not profitable at that time. But you know that your unit economics is good. Therefore, it will catch up and you will be profitable. But if you do what Flipkart had done, which is where you sell a product at below what you bought it, and you scale, your unit economics only gets worse. It doesn't get, and you're never going to make money on that model. So you can only grow as long as there's cheap money available. And at some stage, cheap money won't be available, because what they are also looking at, investors are saying, listen, I'm okay for you to make losses in the short term, but for you to get to a point where you have a level of market dominance, you've scaled over the others, you've got a brand, and then you'll make money. But if you have bad unit economics, it's a challenge. So I would say, number one, growth is good. But before you hit the button on growth, make sure your unit economics is fine. You've tested the market, you know what customers can pay. At that price, you can make money. If you can't make money at that price, figure out what you have to do on production, figure out what you have to do, figure out your cost of customer acquisition. That shouldn't take you over the top. So figure out that you have a reasonably sound business. Then you absolutely should scale. And before you scale, you need to make sure that you have the people and the organization's process structure thought through, so the whole thing doesn't come apart when you grow. Because in growth, one is the part I talked about on the unit economics, but the other part is, do you have the people to grow, or will it become mad? People are doing their own things, your efficiency of execution goes down. If you don't have enough financial controls, if all of that happens, then your growth won't get you to where you want to get to. So growth is very good, but it's a good idea to have your different elements in place before you push the button on rapid growth.
Sure. Easy money, chase market share. Tough money, chase profitability. But the underlying economics has to be right for any business, because ultimately, in the long run, the companies will get valued on ultimately it will be the bottom line. So at some stage or the other, when you go to the stock market, That is the thing that values various companies.
So profitability is a bit like gravity. You know, you might beat it for a while, but eventually there is gravity.
Right. So let's talk about the structure bit, and the ego and so on. A lot of companies run into this problem. There is a bunch of 4 people who start off the entire company, good friend from college. They grow, and then there has to be a head honcho, so that starts creating problems. B, somewhere people start feeling that, oh, I'm contributing more, he's contributing less, so all of those sort of issues start playing up. Third is that people then have different priorities and start going in different directions, and that creates a lot of tensions when startups are growing up. So it's not a problem in the first 2 or 3 years, but from year 3 to year 7 is when you will find a lot of those problems. And of course, we've had ego issues between the founders and the VCs. Housing is a great example where the entire company sort of imploded and is now trying to reconstruct itself.
So we just stay with that subject. I should tell you that it is not as if the companies that have the best idea or the best product always win. It's the companies that get many of the other things right. So we have a general assumption that, if you have the right technology, right product, you're in the right space, right market, you're going to succeed more than somebody else. But I'll tell you, over, I think the last 15, 20 years, I must have been involved in investing in over 100 startups and early stage companies. Most is angel investments, some is VC investments. And the one thing in common is that the company that has the fanciest, or at least what it looks like at the time, the best offering, is not the company that's going to win. So if I just look at Infinity, when we did the first VC fund, PG was involved in that with me as well. There's a company which was way ahead of anything in the world, anything in the US, on Bluetooth. And we said, this is our winner. And we put most of our money, a good part of our money there. That company eventually got us 0. And it failed because the founders couldn't divide roles amongst themselves. They couldn't get along with each other. And when we pushed them to get somebody to do sales and marketing in the US, they wouldn't collaborate with that guy. So eventually, they simply, because of their own cussedness, that company died. And then you take a company like India Bulls. Now, we used to own 21% of India Bulls. And India Bulls didn't have a great model. They were just going to be a Charles Schwab. They were going to copy that model. They tried it. It didn't work. They had to pivot. They had to become a brick and mortar type player. Founders are very smart. They accepted. They said, yeah, we got it wrong. They pivoted. And look at where